Welcome back. Still the second hour here for Breakfast Extra Sunday edition. As Cameroon decides 2025, let's bring you live updates, commentary and on-the-ground insight into how the polls are unfolding. Already across Cameroon, polling units are opening as the stakes are high, with longtime President Paul Biya seeking an 8th term. Controversies over the exclusion of major opposition voices and ongoing conflict in Anglophone regions, the election is under intense scrutiny.
Now to help us navigate the unfolding story, but most importantly to go in depth as to what is at stake for the country this morning. Joining us first is journalist, freelance journalist and reporter. We have Sharon Injix. She joins us live now. Also joining us is lawyer and former presidential aspirant, and that's Asong Khumbah. Gentlemen and lady, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you for coming on. Asong, can you hear me? All right, let's get started with Sharon. Sharon, if you can hear me.
Yes, I do.
Asong, there you are. Asong, now we've seen all that's happened leading up to the, presidential elections, leading up to today, 12th October. Talk to us about, ELECAM's preparedness and vetting of aspirants and also candidates ahead of this election. How ready are they for a credible election?
ELECAM has always given us the impression that they have been ready for these elections. But when you look at the way the pre-electoral process was being conducted, you realize that ELECAM doesn't seem to be very ready. A few months ago, there were equipments that were still being bought by ELECAM, which is the institution that organizes elections in Cameroon. And that just goes to show unpreparedness. I strongly believe that all these equipments and tools which were supposed to be used to conduct elections were supposed to have been bought earlier. We have realized also that ELECAM had published the list of all voters very, very late. And I think that was done about a month ago. So it poses a problem because corrections, errors were not being made on time. Just a few days ago, we realized some Cameroonians were still struggling to have their voters' cards, and they were all filled the ELECAM services. So this just goes to show that ELECAM has not been a serious institution that organizes elections in Cameroon. And of course, we know why they are doing that. That is because they are supporting the incumbent President of the Republic, who is President Paul Biya and who has been there for over 43 years. So when we look at all of these things being conducted, we look at the administrative delays, we look at the manipulations, we look at the fact that the lists were not published on time, we looked at the fact that there is a lot of confusion around the electoral process, then we realize that ELECAM is not a serious institution and that a lot needs to be done to make sure that democracy is at the center of our governance in Cameroon.
So, Asong, let's talk about the way this election is shaping out to be. From before, we had very strong opposition candidates disqualified from the election. Personally, you have also been a presidential candidate. So I'm wondering how that is shaping perception when it comes to the legitimacy of the elections currently.
It's a mixed feeling. It's a mixed feeling, and that just goes to show how the machinery of the regime that has been in power for 43 years is working to make sure that those candidates who could bring more hope, who could actually encourage Cameroonians to go out there more in their masses, to vote and bring the change, are being eliminated. So we all saw the disqualification of Professor Maurice Kamto, who of course is considered to be the main opposition leader in our political environment here in Cameroon. We saw him being eliminated. And not only that, other aspirants like me were eliminated due to the fact that we chose, for example, an independent candidacy which warranted that we should produce about 300 signatures from different authorities. And you realize that there are regions, particularly the regions where the President of the Republic originates from, they refused to give me signatures, and automatically that kicked me out. And these are the manipulations that we see the regime doing to make sure that the candidates which we have are not candidates that could bring hope, and they are not candidates that are credible. So today we are faced with a lot of difficulties. For example, today we have Mr. Issa Chiroma Bakari, who is being in one way or the other pushed forward by the people to be he will replace President Paul Biya. But unfortunately, we know that Issa Chiroma has been working with President Biya for about 30 years. This is someone who has encouraged the regime of Biya, who has made Biya strong, who actually fueled the Anglophone crisis. He even went to the point to say there is no Anglophone crisis. When military men killed Cameroonians, committed genocide, he went as far as saying that they did nothing. So this is somebody today who is being put forward as that candidate who can replace President Paul Biya, but unfortunately his past doesn't actually give him the credibility and integrity needed for him to rule this nation. So of course it brings another mixed feeling. Now we know that he's not the only opposition leader. We know that there is Mr. Bello Buba Maigari, who has also been working with President Biya and has a strong hold. He has been working with President Biya for about 40 years. Now, these two have refused to form a coalition, and it becomes very difficult because we now see votes being divided amongst them. And we know that they all originate from the northern provinces of Cameroon, where they are huge voters. So all of these things makes it more difficult for us to win President Paul Biya, and it gives that feeling that hope is almost gone.
Asong, just to be clear, you're saying that the failure of all opposition to form a united front, whether or not a coalition or a mega party, might hinder them this time around? Is that what you're saying?
I didn't get you, please.
Are you saying that the failure of all opposition candidates to form a united front the last time, or even a coalition or a mega party ahead of this election, might be their Achilles heel? Might be they might not stand a chance?
Yes, of course. It becomes very difficult because you know that the ruling party has a very strong hold. In fact, it's the only party in Cameroon that is being represented at every single square meter. Now, if candidates cannot form a coalition, they cannot choose a consensual candidate that can be able to stand and represent the aspirations of the people, then it becomes very difficult. So it means that votes will be divided. So it's with this division that the President of the Republic has been using to actually hold grip over power. And you even realize that most of those who claim to be opposition leaders today are in one way or the other connected to the ruling party. So it becomes difficult. For example, there are opposition leaders who refuse to choose Issa Chiroma as the consensual candidate, and they said it's because he has been in power with Biya for 30 years, and which is reasonable. Same with Mr. Bello Buba. So you see, all these things surrounding our political environment has made things very, very difficult, and of course, I think it will be very difficult for them to stand the chance to win President Paul Biya.
Let's talk about, as we're talking about politics, let's just give a wider view of Cameroon's political space. Since your last run as an aspirant, what has changed in Cameroon, and what do you want to, to see come out when it comes to sustaining democracy in the country and its political space?
All right, that's a very good question. What you first have to know is that in Cameroon, what we are experiencing is a dictatorship. It's a complete authoritarian regime where the President of the Republic is at the center of every single political and administrative activity. I would like to tell you that in Cameroon, the President of the Republic is the head of the executive. The President of the Republic controls the legislative. The head of the head of state is also the President of the judiciary. So he has made himself boss over each and every institution. He even appoints the directors of ELECA, Elections Cameroon, the institution that organizes elections in Cameroon. So of course you realize that there is no separation of powers in Cameroon, and there is a complete dependence on the President of the Republic for each and everything. So one of the main things that I want to see change, or I even propose to change is that there should be separation of powers. Let the legislative, executive, and judiciary institutions be separate. Let the President of the Republic stop nominating Cameroonians who will stand as those who organize elections. I think that these are individuals that could be nominated either by the parliament or through some other mechanism, but not making the President of the Republic he who nominates them, because automatically they will pay allegiance to him and they will do everything for him to stay in power to preserve their positions. I think that that's the main problem Cameroon is going through today, and of course, not to talk about neo-colonialism, which is still at the heart of our country today. We are still using colonial laws, 18th century laws from Britain and 18th century laws from France. So these are the things that are keeping us underdeveloped. And I strongly believe that if we do, as Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali, by kicking France out, kicking colonial masters out, then certainly we'll be able to develop our country and raise it just the way they are doing. So I think those are the main things that we have in Cameroon today. If we are able to resolve those two things, then I can assure you that Cameroon is going to get to the next level.
That would be a very interesting dynamic in a democratic setting to kick out the nuances of colonial masters. However, I wanted to know, we were supposed to have Sharon Njix with us to give us some on-the-ground assessment, but from your position, I'd like to know, have you noticed any difference between how the elections are being conducted by ELECAM in the Francophone versus the Anglophone areas? Also, should the election be contested, what suggestion would you give when it comes to security operation in trying to make sure that there is no violence?
Well, you have to know that the Anglophone regions in Cameroon are regions of conflict. And I don't know if you've heard about it. For over a month now, there has been declared a ghost town which was normally being declared on Mondays. We now have it. We have now been having it for over a month. And this has actually prevented children from going to school because, you know, in Cameroon, school reopens the month of September. But unfortunately for our young fellow Cameroonians who actually school in the southwest and the northwest regions of Cameroon, they have not yet gone back to school. So that particular declaration of this ghost town will certainly be uplifted. I think they spoke about the 15th of October. That will permit activities to go on normally as they should be on normal working days, because it was being declared that no activity should be done from Monday to Friday, but on Saturdays and Sundays, which are weekends, people could move out and do one or two things and get their necessities. So we're going to realize that the Anglophone regions in Cameroon are regions of conflict, and we know that there are so many areas and territories that are being controlled by the separatist fighters. Now the question is, how does ELECAM plan to conduct elections in a region of crisis? How does the Cameroonian state want to conduct elections in a region where there is war? And I think that these are one of the things I raised, that the Anglophone crisis should have been resolved by now. We are already at 9 years and the crisis has not yet been resolved. So it becomes very, very difficult. I know that the measures which have been taken by the government are to put military units in place, especially in areas where the conflict is very, very harsh, because of course there are areas where it's better than others. And I think those are the measures that they have probably taken to make sure that they could conduct elections in those areas. But it's still very difficult, because these areas which are being controlled by the separatist fighters, the people are extremely scared of them. So I don't even see them going to vote. So the question is, when we shall see the results, when they will be published, then we shall really know if people really participated or not, because we believe that, I strongly believe that this is also an opportunity for them to manipulate results and to give fake results. So these are the things that we have been raising, and we think that that is what they are trying to do. Now, on the other hand, talking about violence, talking about Cameroonians participating in these elections, I believe that we are very much mature. Cameroonians are peaceful people. Cameroonians are people who don't like war, and I think that that's one of the reasons why Biya also has been in power today. And for me, I think it's a good thing, because the life of a Cameroonian is more precious than being at the presidency or having a president being changed. I think we cherish the right to life, we cherish the right to peace, we cherish the right to all these basic human rights which we can have if there is no war and if there is no conflict. So that's simply how the atmosphere looks like. And I think that Cameroonians will not go for violence, because violence is not the way out. I think so many Cameroonians have been educated. Myself, I preach non-violence. I preach peaceful transfer of power. And I think that there is much more that we can do to be more organized, and that in one way or the other, we shall bring change.
So talking about bringing change and the worry and the concerns of the Anglophone region when it comes to deciding the future of Cameroon, whether or not there will be turnout at all. I want to also talk about the security in depth. You've raised major concerns, but across the Anglophone countries as well, we have seen a pattern of radicalization, whether or not is the fighters who are trying to remove themselves with their ties to their neo-colonial masters, or the issue of, let's see now, juntas and coups reappearing in just recent times. One has to also ask about, the issue in the Anglophone regions. Do you see a sweeping or sweep of or a wind of change when it comes to radicalization and with the separatists?
Well, that's quite a difficult question, because when we talk about radicalization, I strongly believe that it can go both ways. It's true that for most of the separatist fighters, they from the start, they were radicalized. I think from the start, it went progressively from peaceful manifestations to demand federalism, and after to separation, where the separatist fighters began to fight for the liberation of, in quotes, the southern Cameroons, aka Ambazonia. I believe that today, due to the fact that the war has stretched over 9 years, I think that in one way or the other, they might be losing hope. This is something which I'm not very sure, but that's what I believe, because this conflict, I felt from the start that the plan was that it would be something might be very easy. It will be something that they will be able to succeed in a few years. On both sides, be it the government, be it the separatist fighters, because the government also thought that they will be able to crush the liberation movement in a few years, which is something that they have not succeeded in doing. And I also believe that they are on the other side too, the separatist fighters thought that they will be able to put an end and liberate their country, in quotes, by now. But the way we see things unveiling themselves as day goes by, as years also go by, we'll realize that nobody is winning. Nobody is winning. And at the end of the day, I think that like every conflict and every war, it always ends with a peaceful negotiation. And I think that that's what each and everyone is looking for. For me, I strongly believe that the separatist fighters, from the very start, their goal was not a secession. Their goal was that the government should respect the Anglophone accords or contracts which they had before the creation of the Federal Republic of Cameroon, that the state should make sure that they treat Anglophones fairly because they were being marginalized and discriminated upon. And I think that these are the simple things that the state simply needed to resolve. And of course, due to the fact that the state played as a leader that is extremely proud, this pushed them to go onto federalism, and now today they are at secession. I believe that the reverse process is also possible. And that's why I had proposed that one of the ways that the Anglophone crisis should be resolved is that we have to do facts check-in, which is one of the procedures being enshrined in Article 33 of the UN Charter, to help Cameroonians understand their history, because I think that that's where the problem comes from. And from there, they will be able to understand that what the separatist fighters are claiming today is not some sort of illusion, because Southern Cameroon has been a state, even though it wasn't a state being recognized by the UN, but it was a state because it fulfilled all the 4 criteria being provided by the Montevideo Convention that governs the existence of states of 1933. So, due to the fact that Southern Cameroon had a territory, it had a people, it had a government, and it could negotiate with other countries, of course, that made it a state. And that is something that the regime today doesn't want to accept. And that's why they don't understand why the Southern Cameroonians and the separatist fighters are fighting with their blood the way they are doing. And due to the fact that I once proposed a mechanism to resolve the Anglophone crisis, and it was even being shared on their TV, I simply believe that the Anglophone crisis is a very, very simple problem to resolve. If the right approach is being taken, if the right words are being used to convince the separatist fighters.
Asong Khumbah,
we have today.
We want to say thank you very much for joining us and giving us details about what to expect come the end of the elections, and of course your view as it stands. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.